in the wake of these blockbuster revelations from the new book, Fear, Trump in the White House, by one of the most respected journalists in the business, Bob Woodward. These are just some of the things that current and former members of the Trump administration are reportedly saying about the President of the United States. Current and former members of the administration, people this president picked himself. The man who chose them for the job. He picked them. It's coming from them. Well, the Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and this is a quote, he says, he's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town. Going on to say, and again, I'm quoting from Bob Woodward's book here, I don't even know why any of us are here. This is the worst job I've ever had. That's the Chief of Staff, John Kelly. Now the Defense Secretary, James Mattis, describing Trump as having the understanding of, quote, a fifth or sixth grader. Trump's former personal lawyer, John Dowd, according to Woodward, described the president as a effing liar. Okay, those are his words. And in an effort to convince Trump not to talk to Mueller, said, quote, don't testify. It's either that or an orange jumpsuit. Former Chief Economic Advisor Gary Cohn, who Woodward reports was appalled that President Trump might have signed a letter withdrawing the U.S. from a crucial trade agreement with South Korea, potentially jeopardizing a top secret national security program. Here's a quote from him. I stole it, that is the letter, off his desk. I wouldn't let him see it. He's never going to see that document. Got to protect the country. And former Staff Secretary Rob Porter, quote, a third of my job was trying to react to some of the really dangerous ideas that he had and try to give him reasons to believe that maybe they weren't such good ideas. And of course, there's the previously reported comment from the former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson saying this about the president, quote, he's a effing moron, idiot, crazy town, liar, dangerous, having the understanding of a fifth or sixth grader. What they're saying there is, I mean, really ominous. Again, current and former administration. These are Republicans. I mean, that is really ominous. Presumably the people who know the president better than anyone talking about Trump in a way that it's got to raise questions about his fitness for office. Denials of portions of those quotes coming out of the White House tonight, notably from John Kelly, James Mattis, Rudy Giuliani, and John Dowd. But this is an important point. There are tapes. In a note to readers in his book, Bob Woodward says the book is drawn from hundreds of hours of interviews with first-hand participants and witnesses to the events. Nearly all allowed me to tape record our interviews so the story could be told with more precision. CNN has confirmed that Woodward spoke to at least a dozen former and current White House officials. And the president himself said in a phone call, he knew it was being recorded. He said, quote, I think you've always been fair. But then I want you to listen to this, because the president changing his tune in that same call on whether any Republican senators talked to him about Woodward, okay?
And I certainly don't mind talking to you, and I wish I could have spoken to you.
Well,
but you know, but nobody called my office. I mean, you went through, different people.
Mr. President, how can I spend all this time talking to people and like Kellyanne and Raj and Republican senators? I mean,
who were the senators? No, they never called me about it.
Senator Graham said he had talked to you about talking to me. Now, is that not true?
Senator Graham actually mentioned it quickly on one meeting,
right.
and
we'll see,
you know, that is true.
Okay, you heard that. So he said no, and then he said that is true. The president saying, quote, I certainly don't mind talking to you, and I wish I could have spoken to you. But nobody called my office. I mean, you went through, I guess, different people. Woodward replying here, well, Mr. President, how can I spend all this time talking to people like Kellyanne and Raj and Republican senators? The president asks, who were the senators? No, they never called me about it. Woodward? Senator Graham said he had talked to you about talking to me. Now, is that not true? The president. Senator Graham actually mentioned it quickly in one meeting. Woodward's reply, yes, well, see, and then nothing happened. So, Do you believe Woodward, or do you believe the man who told you this?
Just remember, what you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
So let's discuss this. A lot to get to in the coming hours here on CNN. I'm going to bring in CNN special correspondent Jamie Gengel, CNN political commentator Alice Stewart, and Republican strategist Rick Wilson, the author of Everything Trump Touches Dies. Good evening to all of you on this very busy Tuesday. I hope you got lots of rest over the Labor Day weekend, because here we go. We're back at it again. Jamie, you were the first to obtain the book outside the Washington Post, and you read it cover to cover several times, I've heard.
Right.
These devastating details pouring out, and it seems that so many close associates of this president question his fitness for office.
I think that we're reporting on the highlights. Let me just tell you, it is the tip of the iceberg. The fact that people, this is his inner circle. These are not critics. These are the people who are in the room with him day in and day out, went to what are extraordinary measures to do what they felt was protecting the country, because they felt that he was a danger to national security. I've never heard anything quite like this before. The book opens with this dramatic story that you told about Gary Cohn coming in, got to protect the country, but he wasn't alone. This was a group that was doing it. Gary Cohn, Rob Porter. It was done with the knowledge of Chief of Staff Reince Priebus. And in addition to the documents, they also would just slow roll things or distract him or change the subject. There is just extraordinary detail over a long period of time, incident after incident, that is scary. You know, we want a president to be able to manage a crisis, maybe the most important thing they do. When you hear his closest aides saying, as you quoted, that he doesn't have the knowledge, he doesn't understand substance, all of which is reported in the book, you have to worry.
Yeah, and we want them, you said, to be able to handle a crisis, but Rick, we want them to be competent, because this idea that top aides to the president swipe papers off of his desk because they didn't want him to see or sign them, and Gary Cohn said this because he felt the need to protect the country, that is stunning. Why don't they just say, okay, look, this isn't right, America. I can no longer do that. Why can't they just be honest with America and come clean instead of protecting this president and possibly harming the American people?
They've made a decision to execute the 25th Amendment option of removing Donald Trump from the presidency. They just haven't told him or us. They have decided they're going to sideline Donald Trump because he's a dangerous man with a degree of mental and personal instability that puts the country at risk. And every day, these examples of Donald Trump's impulse and ego getting the best of him, play out. And these guys have to say, am I going to stay here inside the belly of the beast and hope that I can move a few things off of his radar screen so he doesn't start World War III or destroy our alliances forever? But the truth of the matter is, they're morally culpable in the end. If they really were concerned about the fate of the country, they would stand up and speak out. You notice that these guys are going to deny that they spoke to Woodward. They're going to pretend it wasn't them. They're all going to deny it. This happens with every Woodward book, Republican administrations and Democratic administrations. But Bob Woodward has the juice here. He's got the facts. And I think that this is going to be a very hard time for these folks, because you heard the conversation with Trump and Kellyanne today. He's not going to trust anybody. He's not going to trust any of these people. He's going to think they're all screwing him. They're all out to get him. The President Queeg is going to be very paranoid going forward, even more so than he has been to date.
Hey, Alice, I'm going to bring you in, but just quickly, Rick, I want to say this to you. This is, it kind of reminds me of what I'm sure you experience and I experience at people behind the camera or in the green room or maybe at a dinner, or you see them out in public and they go, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this, blah, 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 blah. And then they get in front of a camera and you say, well, who are you? What, you didn't just say that, to me when I saw you on Saturday night when I bumped into you at a restaurant. Go on, quickly, because I get Allison.
I write about it in my book a lot. These people are terrified of Donald Trump's Twitter, They're terrified of Fox News turning on them. And so they're willing to put the country at risk. They're willing to lie constantly to their own constituents, their own friends, their own families. And yet they know what Donald Trump is. They know he is a guy without any impulse control, and they know he's a danger to this country.
Alice, not to be redundant, because again, I think it's stunning some of the allegations in this book. According to Woodward, the Defense Secretary, James Mattis, describing the president as having the understanding of a 5th or 6th grader. Or again, the Staff Secretary, Rob Porter, describing how he had to steer the president away from the dangerous ideas. I mean, and it's not coming, as Jamie said, this isn't coming from Trump-hating Democrats. This is coming from his aides and his cabinet officials.
Sure, and the reality is, look, we all knew that the president himself had a potty mouth when he ran for president, but hearing these stories of the president and his senior team calling each other idiots and retarded and a dumb southerner and effing this and effing that, and the fact that this crazy town in the White House, this is makes for a great book. The reality is, speaking with some at the White House, I talked to Kellyanne just a short time ago, a lot of this comes from former employees who are disgruntled and want to make sure that they have a story that is salacious out there in order to make their time in the White House look a little better. That being said, I do believe this book's reporting. I do believe he's going to get the facts straight. Even Ari Fleischer says you might not like some of the things that he reports, but he does get the facts straight.
But Alice, do you think this goes beyond potty mouth? This comes to competence and credibility. I mean, and then I don't hear a lot of happy White House staffers speaking out, except for people like Kellyanne, who sort of just keeps spinning and spinning and spinning like a top.
Look, these are, you know, even like I said, even if half of these stories are true and this document was taken off the president's desk because Gary Cohn and others may have felt the president's knee-jerk reaction was going to be harmful to this country, people across America, I've traveled this country over the last month or so, they're not concerned about the palace intrigue. They are concerned about the other big news story of the day, which is the main reason I voted for this president, knowing all of this other stuff was out there, was that he was going to appoint Scalia-like justice to the Supreme Court. They are not concerned about this, and quite frankly, they're watching another network that downplays this story and upplays the economic numbers and the jobs numbers and the Kavanaugh hearing, which is important. And Trump's base, the people that he is most directing his message to, they are not sidelined by a book of palace intrigue. They are focused on the economics and jobs numbers that we're getting out of this White House.
Don, can I just jump in a minute? I've read the book. I don't believe that Kellyanne Conway has read the book. And so this excuse that these are former disgruntled officials, I just don't think is going to wash when the book comes out next week and people read it. Yes, there are some former people, but there are also current administration officials. And what I've said about this is, you know, in Watergate, there was the famous deep throat that was a source for Bob Woodward. He interviewed dozens of first-hand officials. There are dozens of deep throats here, and most of them allowed their interviews to be recorded.